You didn't imagine it. The silence, the rejection, the door closing in your face. What you didn't expect is that the same woman who walked away would one day knock again. I want you to listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it will finally make sense of something that has probably haunted you. When a woman rejects you and later comes back, it's rarely about romance, fate, or sudden clarity. It's about psychology, emotional safety, and how attraction actually works beneath polite words and social masks. When she rejected you, she wasn't rejecting your value as a man. She was responding to how she felt in that moment, about herself, about control, about uncertainty. Most men assume rejection means you weren't enough. That belief quietly poisons your confidence. But from a psychological perspective, rejection often means, I don't feel safe enough to desire this right now. Safety doesn't mean kindness. It means emotional predictability, internal alignment, and power balance. Here's the truth men aren't taught. Attraction isn't linear. It's elastic. When you showed interest, consistency, or emotional availability, her nervous system categorized you. Not as bad, not as good, as known. And when something becomes known too quickly, mystery collapses. Desire doesn't grow in certainty, it grows in tension. So she stepped back. She chose distance. Sometimes she chose another man. Sometimes she chose solitude. And you were left wondering what you did wrong. But something happened after you disappeared. Your absence created a psychological vacuum. The same brain that dismissed you began to reprocess you. In psychology, we call this delayed valuation. Humans often underestimate what feels accessible and overvalue what feels scarce. When you stopped trying to convince her, stopped chasing clarity, stopped explaining yourself, her emotional mind finally had room to feel instead of defend. Desire cannot exist where pressure lives. Another layer most men never see is comparative attraction. After rejecting you, she didn't step into perfection. She stepped into reality. Other men came with their own flaws, insecurities, inconsistencies, and emotional chaos. And suddenly, the version of you she once overlooked began to look different in memory. Not because you changed, but because contrast did. Memory edits people, especially when emotions are involved. Your calm became stability. Your restraint became strength. Your silence became confidence. This is why men who beg never get called back, and men who walk away often do. It's not punishment, it's perception. But listen carefully. Her coming back is not proof that she finally realized your worth. It's proof that you triggered something unresolved inside her. Comfort, validation, emotional grounding. And unless you understand this, you'll repeat the same cycle with her or the next woman. The most dangerous mistake men make at this stage is believing the return is a reward. It isn't. It's a test. She's subconsciously checking whether you are still the same man who overinvests, overexplains, and abandons his center for approval, or whether you've grown into someone whose presence is chosen, not negotiated. This is where power silently shifts, and most men don't even realize it's happening. Now let me tell you the part most men never hear, because it doesn't flatter you and it doesn't villainize her. When a woman comes back, it's not because she suddenly became brave enough to choose love. It's because something inside her emotional world destabilized. And humans, when destabilized, seek familiar ground. Women are deeply intuitive about emotional states, but intuition doesn't equal clarity. When she rejected you, she was operating from her conscious preferences, what sounded right, what felt socially acceptable, what aligned with her current identity. But attraction doesn't live in the conscious mind. It lives in the body, in memory, in sensation, and those things don't obey logic. Time passes. Life humbles people. Expectations collapse quietly. The excitement she chased fades faster than she expected. The men who looked confident reveal fragility. The attention she thought she wanted starts to feel empty. And then, without warning, her nervous system remembers how she felt around you. Not the conversation, not the outcome, the feeling. This is where men misunderstand what missing you actually means. She doesn't miss you the way you miss her. She misses how regulated she felt in your presence. She misses the version of herself that existed when you were around. Calm, desired, grounded, seen without being consumed. You became an emotional reference point, not a fantasy. And here's the brutal truth. Women don't come back to men they feel superior to. They come back to men they couldn't dominate emotionally. If she felt she had full control over your reactions, your availability, your self-worth, there would be no mystery left to revisit. Control kills curiosity. When you didn't collapse after the rejection, when you didn't rage, plead, or linger in emotional debt, something unexpected happened. Her internal story broke. She expected guilt or resentment. She expected you to remain frozen in longing. Instead, you moved on psychologically, even if she didn't know how. That quiet shift registered deeply. From a psychological standpoint, this triggers what we call unresolved attachment loops. The mind hates open-ended emotional narratives. It wants closure. When you removed yourself without hostility or desperation, you became unfinished business. And unfinished business has gravity. But let me slow you down here because this is where ego seduces men into self-destruction. Her return is not an apology. It's not accountability. It's curiosity mixed with emotional need. She wants to know whether she still has access to the version of you that made her feel safe without effort. That's why she often comes back casually. A message, a reaction, a random check-in. Not vulnerability, not clarity, just enough contact to test the water. If you respond with emotional flooding, overexcitement, explanations, immediate availability, you answer her question in seconds, and the attraction dies again. What she's unconsciously asking is simple. Did rejecting you make you smaller, or did it reveal your stability? Women are not attracted to men who endure pain loudly. They are drawn to men who metabolize pain quietly and grow structure from it. And here's the uncomfortable mirror. Many men want women to come back so they can finally feel chosen. But if your sense of worth depends on her return, you've already lost the leverage that made her curious in the first place. The return only happens because you stopped trying to be chosen. And the moment you forget that, the cycle resets, this time with less respect. Now I'm going to say something that will challenge the story you've been telling yourself, and I need you to hear it without defensiveness. A woman coming back does not mean she is ready for you. It means she is ready to reassess you. Those are very different psychological states, and confusing them is how men lose themselves. When she returns, she is not stepping into vulnerability. She is stepping into evaluation. She is scanning your tone, your boundaries, your pace. She is observing whether your life expanded or contracted without her, whether your emotional center strengthened or stayed dependent. Women don't test men consciously. Their nervous systems do it automatically. This is why many men feel confused when the return feels warm but non-committal. She laughs, she reminisces, she flirts lightly, but she doesn't move forward. That's because attraction doesn't reopen the same way it closes. It reopens cautiously. And if you rush it, you collapse the tension that brought her back in the first place. Here's the part men struggle with most. The healthiest response to her return is not enthusiasm. It's calm curiosity, emotional neutrality with grounded presence. When you react as if you've been waiting, you confirm that rejecting you carried no cost. When you react as if your life is already full, you signal value without performance. From a psychological lens, this is about frame control, not dominance, not games. Frame. Your frame is the emotional reality you operate from. If her return becomes the center of your emotional weather, she feels it instantly, and desire cannot survive where pressure re-enters. Let me be very clear. You don't win by withholding. You win by not needing. There is a difference, and women can feel it at a biological level. Withholding is manipulative. Not needing is peaceful. One creates anxiety, the other creates trust mixed with attraction. Another truth men avoid is this. Sometimes women come back to relieve guilt, not to build intimacy. Guilt is heavy. Reconnection can feel like relief. If you absorb her without discernment, you become a tool for emotional regulation, not a chosen partner. That's why boundaries matter more after the return than before the rejection. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They determine whether someone has access to your energy, not just your attention. A man with boundaries doesn't ask, "Do you want me now?" He asks, "Does this align with the life I'm building?" And here is the paradox. The moment you are genuinely okay with her staying or leaving again is the moment she feels safest leaning in. Not because you are indifferent, but because you are anchored. If she senses that you learned from the rejection, that you became more self-directed, more emotionally sovereign, her attraction has room to grow. But if she senses that you preserved yourself in waiting mode, the respect that brought her back will evaporate quietly. Most men want closure. Psychology teaches us something harsher. Growth rarely comes from closure. It comes from integration. Integrating the rejection, the absence, the return, without letting any of them define you. If she comes back and you are still the same man, the story ends the same way. If she comes back and you are not, the outcome becomes unpredictable in the best way. And that unpredictability is where real attraction lives. Now listen carefully, because this is where everything comes together, and where most men either evolve or repeat the same pain with a different face. The final truth is not about her coming back. It's about what kind of man exists when she does. A woman returning after rejection is not fate circling back. It's feedback. Life is quietly showing you the impact of your absence, your restraint, your growth. But feedback is only useful if you read it correctly. If you misread it as validation, you shrink. If you read it as information, you expand. Here's the hardest reality to accept. Women don't come back because you waited. They come back because you didn't. Because while she was living her life, you were rebuilding your internal structure. You were learning emotional regulation. You were redirecting energy into purpose, discipline, self-respect. Even if she never saw it directly, she felt the result of it. Masculine stability is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's sensed. When you speak slower, when you don't rush to fill silence, when you don't demand reassurance, when your mood doesn't hinge on her tone. These are signals far stronger than compliments or promises. If she stays this time, it will not be because you proved your worth. It will be because you no longer need to. That's the paradox most men miss. The man who is trying to be chosen is invisible. The man who has chosen himself becomes undeniable. And if she leaves again, because sometimes she will, this is where the real transformation shows. You don't collapse. You don't spiral. You don't chase meaning from her behavior. You simply continue. That continuity is power, not dominance, not coldness. Power comes from emotional continuity under pressure. As a psychologist, I'll tell you something that rarely gets said to men directly. The goal is not to make women come back. The goal is to become the kind of man whose presence is optional, not necessary, and therefore deeply desired. Some women will return because they finally see you clearly. Others will return because they lost clarity elsewhere. Your job is not to decode which one she is in a rush. Your job is to remain grounded enough that the answer reveals itself over time. And here's the final truth that separates men who grow from men who cope. When a woman comes back after rejecting you, the real question is not, why now? The real question is, who did I become in her absence? Because that man, that version of you, is the one who determines whether this becomes a new chapter or the same wound reopened. So let me leave you with a question that only honest men can answer. If she never came back, would the man you're becoming still be worth becoming? Write your answer in the comments. I read them. And if this spoke to something you couldn't explain but always felt, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share this with a friend who needs to hear it before he mistakes attention for growth.